We have a budget that's out of control, and we have a tremendous deficit, and we have a national debt that is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an accountant, so I think this way. How are we ever going to repay our national debt if we don't have a balanced budget? And I realize that there are legislation that's going to create additional burden on us as Americans. How do you see us with a neutral budget, and then secondly, how do we reduce our national debt?
Well, it is a real, I agree with you, and of course I really find myself to be my grandfather's child, who said, you know, debt is a dangerous thing. And luckily I married a man who is very similar. You know, my husband Steve and I pay off our credit card bills every month. We pay for our cars. We do have a mortgage on our house, but you know, we're very conservative in that thought. I'm very conservative in my thought with where your tax dollars go to. And I work hard to make sure that whatever I'm investing in is going to bring a good return, both to the government and to the taxpayer. And that's one of the reasons I had real concerns about the original health care bill that was being presented from the Health Committee. And from the House particularly, was my concern about what the long-term liability was going to be to taxpayers and to the Treasury. Now, as you well know, as an accountant, we have an annual deficit, which comes from spending more than what revenues we bring in. But we also have a national debt which is cumulative. It's about 12 trillion, I think, right now, in terms of that long-term debt. One of the things that we realize, though, if you look at the accounting numbers, is that the annual deficit spending that we have, which may be, yes, from the recovery package, that money was not paid for. Some of it was, but not all of it. But that's a trickle compared to the mandatory spending that adds to the national long-term debt. Programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Those are spending programs that are adding far more to the long-term debt of this country than the annual overspending that we have. And that's why this health care bill is so important, for two reasons. And I fought hard. I didn't get all that I wanted, but I got a lot. And one is that it's deficit neutral in the 10-year window of what we are doing in terms of trying to shift our healthcare system, our healthcare delivery system, into one that's more productive and efficient. But in the second 10 years, we bring down the cost of healthcare by putting downward pressure in multiple different ways. There's wellness and prevention, which is hard to believe. It doesn't score us much, but quite frankly, it scores something in that long-term depression on the cost of healthcare. And there's other things that do as well. We've got to start taking those kinds of steps in mandatory spending programs as well that will keep those dollars down in the out years, in that long-term debt that's being created. You know, yes, we need to cut back, but if you were to eliminate all of the non-defense discretionary spending that we spend every year, it'd be a trickle. It would be virtually nothing. Even if you eliminated funding for education, if you eliminated funding for other, again, non-defense discretionary spending, you wouldn't be able to put a dent in what we've got. We've got to look at the long-term problems and those bigger mandatory spending programs. And I think this health care bill is going to be a good start in terms of really bringing down those costs. There's other things that we've got to do, and you know, we're looking at opportunities and ways to do that. But you're exactly right, and I certainly appreciate it. I voted to extend the debt ceiling for 2 months, but I told them that I had great reservations about that. And I felt like that before we could vote to do any more in terms of extending that debt ceiling, that we had to have at least the beginnings of a pathway of where we're going to deal with the long-term debt in this country. And I think we will. There is a move afoot for a commission, much like the BRAC Commission. And one of the other big long-term savings in the health care bill is the MedPAC Commission. We give greater authority and which I have a little concern about, but I think it's, in this environment it's necessary. Greater authority to the MedPAC Commission to actually not just make recommendations, but to put into play cost savings tools in our healthcare delivery system that will bring down those costs. Before, Congress has always had to statutorily approve that. And under this bill, they could move forward in some of those cost-saving measures without having that statutory approval. But Congress does have the ability to override it, but you have to have 67 votes in the Senate to do that. So there's some tools in there that I think will be very helpful. And there's probably more, and I'll start looking for them, so I'll be able to share them with you. But I'm looking for them too.